Dear friends of the Diplomatic Academy and students of the Diplomatic Academy, welcome to all of you. Welcome especially also to those who follow us on live stream. I understand we have a lot of viewers especially from Africa, especially from Cameroon for some specific reason. It's a pleasure to welcome you here to a Jubilee lecture. It doesn't often happen that this academy has professors who are here for such a long time as the one which I ask you to welcome with a round of applause, Professor Jean-Emmanuel Pondi. Welcome to us. And please welcome our Dean, Professor Kornprobst, who will moderate this evening. I'm not sure whether it's necessary to introduce Professor Pondi, but just let me say he has been a professor here for now 20 years. I don't remember the time when he was first time here because I've only 6 years, so you have 20 years. But I looked up what the title of his first lecture was here and his first course he gave here. It was called Dynamics of African Integration. 20 years later, we talk about the dynamics of the alliance of Sahelian states in 2024. So he stays on the topic that he knows a lot about. It's good for him. I hope it's good for the African continent, but I'm sure a lot of people can learn from his experience. And he's been a lecturer in these 20 years on a lot of African issues, but not only African, also on international order, changes of international order, and his career can tell us a lot about his background. He studied various UK universities, including Cambridge, but he also studied in the United States and certainly in Cameroon, in Yaoundé, and he has been active as a researcher and as a lecturer, but also as a you might call him science officer in various universities, up to the position which he holds right now as a vice-rector of the Vice-Chancellor of the Yaoundé University, among other things responsible for research and for cooperation. So he is our safe horse in Africa, if I may say so, and I'm saying it in a very positive way because we are proud that we have him with us, especially now when we talk about the turbulence in the global order. We very often look also at the African situation. We should maybe even more look at it, and I hope at this place we can even increase our offers on African studies here, and we will contact you continuously to help us to increase this, and that also includes certainly students from the African continent. But this is something that we all have in the Western world to work on, I understand. But there is a renewed interest, I guess, and it's very good on the European side on these contacts and on the African side on these contacts. Part of this has to do with the fact that we understand that we're living in an age of geopolitics, and partly it has to do with, I would say, some more of national interest issues like migration issues in Europe, which are hard to deal with in an objective way. Let me say, we had to yesterday here the Human Rights Council of Egypt, and I asked them. This was a rhetorical question: how many Egyptians are crossing the Mediterranean to migrate to Europe? And he didn't even have the exact number, but he said about 20,000. And we are discussing these issues in a very, let's call it, hyper way sometimes, and do not differentiate between the aspects that we have to discuss. But tonight we have the pleasure to hear about the Sahel area and the alliances there, and the possibility of regional cooperation, which again has to do a lot with the European past in the region, but also with, I would say, the failure of some Western ideas about how the Sahel region works and what is possible to do in this region. It's dynamic. it's a dynamic court that he is dealing with, but possibly with the experience of Professor Emmanuel Pondi, we will get forward, and I'm very much, have to say, I congratulate us to have him here as a permanent, non-resident professor at the Vienna School of International Studies. Welcome again, Professor Pondi.
Mr. Director of the Diplomatic Academy, Mrs. Deputy Director of the Diplomatic Academy, Professor Kornprobst of the Diplomatic Academy as well, distinguished guests, distinguished colleagues, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. I'm extremely touched by what is happening this evening. After having set foot here for the first time in 2004, I'd like to say that I've been always very happy to come here. And every time has been a very warm welcome. With all the staff that works here, I'd like today to pay tribute to all of them. Before beginning, I asked for permission to say just 2 words about 2 people. The first is Ambassador Ernst Sukaripa, who was director of the Diplomatic Academy and who signed my first contract to start here. It was in 2004, and I was director of the International Relations Institute of Cameroon. In this very room, I gave a talk on the training of African diplomats. It's after that he wanted to exchange with me. And from that time on until today, I think that it's been going on. Without him and without his requests, very nice request that I should come and try, give lectures here, I would not be here. So I would like, in a few minutes, just to have 1 minute of silence in his honor and to pay tribute to him. The second person is my mother-in-law, who just died 2 weeks ago while I was here. And in our tradition, an African tradition, it would be a serious mistake for me to start an activity like this one without a minute of silence. So I haven't seen her, of course I haven't seen the family since, but I think that the least that we could do is just 1 minute of silence for these 2 personalities, and I crave your indulgence if you could accept to do that, please. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I hope it's open. No, not yet. The topic which I have to discuss with you this afternoon is state building or state disintegration, an assessment of the dynamics of the alliance of the Sahel states in 2024. We can start by asking the question, why that choice of topic today? And the answer might be the place of a state in the domain of international relations. As we all know, the state is not the only actor, but it's a primordial actor in international relations. It is a state that can reconfigure the system. It is a state alone that has one characteristic, which is sovereignty. And I think because of that, it's important to have a solid state, to have a state which is reliable, which has a state which can, in fact, give the service for which it is expected to give. And in the Northern Hemisphere, I will just give one example. Someone whom I'm sure you know here in the Diplomatic Academy is Francis Fukuyama. He's an American political scientist. He wrote a book exactly when I started here, 2004. It's a coincidence. And his book is entitled State Building, governance, and world order in the 21st century. In that book, he explains why a state is important. And he says, well, it's one of the most important issues, and I'm quoting him, for the world community because weak or failed states, this is an expression borrowed to Professor William Zachman, who is at Johns Hopkins University. These states, he says, are a source of many troubles or many problems in the world, and including drugs and terrorism. And then he asks a question, which is interesting. He says, my preoccupation is thus, how to transfer strong institutions to developing countries. Okay, we'll come back to that, because that question itself begs some more explanations. In the Southern Hemisphere, some African political scientists have also dealt with the same subject. Basically, we can recall Ali Mazrui, who was a professor of political science at Makerere University, which is in Uganda. He was trained there and also at Oxford. And he wrote a book which is very interesting called Cultural Forces in World Politics. That was a long time ago also, 1990. From this brief review, it appears clearly that this is not the first time we're talking about that topic. So I would like to bring you greetings from the ICT University, of which I'm a Vice-Chancellor, especially the President of the Board of Trustees, to whom I just talked a few minutes ago, asked me to make sure that I do that. So I'm happy to bring you greetings from him. I'm happy to bring you also greetings from the International Relations Institute, which is our School of Diplomacy. It's been created in 1971, and it's still going on today. So again, from them, from the director, I would like to bring you greetings from them. We are going to treat that subject according to these different aspects. And we start with the introduction, which has been already done. But we have to do a brief presentation of the Alliance of Sahel States. It's a new structure that has come to the world, and I think unexpectedly so. In fact, no one was expecting to hear it or to see it or to understand that such a structure will come to life now. The Alliance of Sahel States is a mutual defense pact created between three countries, which are Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. What you see there in red are the territories of these countries. And they are in West Africa, meaning that it is below the Sahara, and to the left where you see now. These are the flags of Burkina Faso, of Mali, and Niger. Mali is a country with 1,200,000 square kilometers. It's a huge country. Burkina Faso is smaller, 272,000 square kilometers. And Niger, again, is a heavyweight in terms of size, 1,200,000 approximately square kilometers. So when these three decide, as they have done, to leave the ECOWAS, which is the Economic Community of West African States, it's 54% of the land area of that ECOWAS that is taken out. So it's really a big chunk. These are the three people you might have heard about on radio or television. The president of the transition of Burkina Faso is a captain of the army, and his name is Ibrahim Traoré. As you can see, he was born in 1988, meaning that by now he's 36 years old. Okay, he's a is a military person, and he went also to the University of Ouagadougou. He's one of the few who have gone to an external training rather than just training within the military. The second is a colonel. He's a colonel, Assimi Goïta of Mali, born in 1983, so he's about 41 years old approximately, and he's also an army colonel. What is interesting is that he was trained also in the USA and by US forces. This is not very well known. He was in US Africa Command. He worked with them a lot. He was trained in France, and he was trained in Germany. Okay, I'm noticing that because later he's been accused of being anti all of these, but he was trained by them, so which means that he knows them quite well. And then the last one is General Abdourahmane Tiani. Normally it's Tiani of Niger. He's a general, so he has accumulated some years within the military, of course. He's 64 years old. So here we have 3 officers, 1 captain, 1 colonel, and 1 general. Okay, so they decided to create that alliance precisely because they were not happy with what happened. They were not happy at all, and they decided to create the alliance. It is a mutual defense pact, as I said, created between these 3 countries. What makes these particular military people a bit out of the ordinary? Because contrary to many in Africa, I'm not saying all, but I'm saying many, they have a very good knowledge of their history. It's clear when they talk, and it's clear when they explain things. The second thing is that they have an understanding of the complexity of the present context as far as Africa is concerned. So the situation today is Africa is at a crossroads, clearly, and why and how this is going to be negotiated is extremely delicate. And finally, they have a vision of an increasingly self-reliant Africa in the near future. And this contradicts what we always hear, that they are leaving the West to go to the East. This is what we hear all the time. But when you listen to what they have to say, this is not exactly the kind of things that they are telling. Now, we will have to ask a question. What does African history tell us about the past of the West African economic power? And the reason why that question comes here is to know that that place, which is called West Africa today, corresponds exactly to the ancient empires of Africa. Where we just saw the red, that's where the empires of Africa were. And it's important when you want to deal with the present and also with the future to know what the past was. That's why I think it's good to have an idea. The Ghana Empire is not where current Ghana is, because current Ghana was called the Gold Coast. It's north of Ghana, of current Ghana. So it was an empire, 830, 1235. It's important to know it was a very prosperous one, living with gold, ivory, the commerce of ivory, salt, and also very much dealing in terms of trade with the Sahara. Because Sahara was, at that time, it was more of a road to go and sell things, rather than a desert which we see today as really everywhere. Then you see, it's all in the same area. This is the Mali, in fact, its kingdom, with the capital city of the Ghana Empire was Kumbisali. The capital city of the Mali kingdom is Gao, and you can see that the land area encompasses former Ghana and now extend itself to Mali. So that was interesting to know. And after that, you have, of course, the last. I'm introducing you now to somebody whom was quite famous in his time, is His Imperial Majesty Mansa Musa. He was a unique person in the sense that he was considered to be the richest person of his time in gold value. In gold value. Because this empire, the Mali Empire, has so much gold, just like the Ghana Empire, so much gold that when he left for a Mecca trip in 1324, 1326, he went with 300,000 pieces of gold. And I think it's written there. And he arrived and stopped at Cairo. He was distributing gold. So the rate of gold in Egypt changed because of his presence there. So it's just to let you know that things were a bit different from what we see today or from the picture which we have today. It's important to know that because if you want to build a state, if you want to build a community, you must, in fact, use what can galvanize people, not the miserable attitude which makes people not really want to mobilize. So it's important and it's interesting to see such a person. Who was describing him? It was not himself. It was Ibn Battuta. Ibn Battuta is a Moroccan traveler, a Moroccan historian, quote unquote, historian of the time, and he wrote Tariq al-Sudan. Tariq al-Sudan meaning the stories of Black Africa. And he was himself there in 1353. He was himself in the Mali Empire, and he described what he saw in the Mali Empire in terms of cities. We were told that there were no cities in Africa. In terms of the splendor which he described, he said there was gold everywhere to an extent where it was inimaginable. Okay, so I just wanted to this is the last of the empires, 1430, 1591. It was the Battle of Tondibi, which was the last clarion call for that empire. And it was the Almoravids of Morocco who defeated this empire. And this, in fact, definitely brought an end to long-standing empires from the 9th century to the 16th century. These empires were raised, were constructed, but also disintegrated, of course. But when they disintegrated, they went on being stronger and stronger, not weaker and weaker. The last empire, of course, is the last clarion call also, because after that, there will be the end of this West African empire. So the notion of construction and disgregation or collapse is also there to see. What makes it possible for these occurrences to happen? We'll talk about that very soon. So this is a summary, and you see that it corresponds exactly to the area we are talking about today. Okay. Now, the main characteristics of these empires is that they were multi-ethnic, multilingual, and multi-civilizational. It's very important to understand that. It was not civilizational with one language. All these ethnic groups that you see were coexisting within the same political order. So it means that you need to have the capacity or the capability to have an administration, to have a military system, to have a bureaucracy that is capable of handling these varieties and diversities which compose the big kingdom. They move from the smaller, which is the Ghana, to of course, the Songhai Empire. So it's important to know that it was possible. It was done. It is not something which we are speculating about. It was done. Okay? Now, having said that, we move on to the presentation of it's here. It's ECOWAS. Okay. The Sahel states are within ECOWAS. ECOWAS is the Economic Community of West African States, created on the 28th of May, 1975 in Lagos. And it's important to know what were the purposes for which they were created. Okay? And the statutory functions of ECOWAS are there, taken in their own literature, in their own documentation. So you can see it's to maintain peace, promote economic integration, harmonize policies and legislation, and so on and so on. But what is important is that nowhere is it written here that it is to attack other member states. Okay. Nowhere is it written here. What is written here, they will create, after the second revision of the treaty in 1993, they will create a peacekeeping force which is meant to ensure peace within the perimeters of ECOWAS, but not to attack another state. That is written nowhere here, as you can see. I think it's important to understand that. And now, with it, you also have what is called the G5 Sahel, which is a subset, in somehow, of the ECOWAS, but which was really financed, basically, by the European Union. It's important to understand that. And when I say financed by the European Union, it's with a lot of money, as you will see. Between 2014 and 2020, the European Union spent 4 billion and 720 million euros to entertain this particular force, which in dollars, I know that there are some Americans here, in dollars is 5 billion and 21. It's a lot of money. And they even created a force. The reason being, they were combating the jihadists and extreme violence. Precisely because after so many years, the progress in that particular mandate was difficult to see. The local population started to be a bit impatient about the presence, but not seeing the results. And also the mandate did not push them to fight, but rather to react in case of attack. So there were a lot of problems which occurred, as we can see later. And what is at the heart of the problem and the crisis is the fact that the ECOWAS has decided to actually expel. It's the ASS that actually decided to go, but the ECOWAS decided to punish them and, in fact, to attack them. That was the heart of the problem. They had forgotten something. First of all, that it is difficult when it is not written somewhere, but also that they will constitute really a defense pact, which is similar to what the League of Nations was also envisaging in 1919. But in this particular occasion, it worked because they were not able to attack. And a country was suspected of also helping or encouraging, not overtly, but behind the scene. It was France. For a simple reason, I would say, reasons which are understandable. France relies on the uranium of Niger to a very large extent. 34% of the uranium which is used in France today comes from Niger. And you understand that when that source is severed, you are in deep trouble. You're in very deep trouble. So they were very anxious to encourage the ECOWAS leaders to do something. And doing something meaning claiming that the ousted civilian presidents, of course it's illegal, should be reinstated in their positions, according to what the Constitution says. So that was really the heart of the confrontation between the three who had left and the rest. But inside the ECOWAS, you had three countries that really were very bullish about attacking eventually, paradoxically. One was Nigeria. The new president of Nigeria, he was not there for a long time, he was in agreement that something should be done because the constitutionality of these countries had been violated. So there was him. There was a president of Côte d'Ivoire. By the way, Côte d'Ivoire doesn't want the name of his country to be translated in English or in German. Okay, in any language which you use, you must always say Côte d'Ivoire. So the president of Côte d'Ivoire, Alassane Ouattara, also was in favor of an attack. And a third president was the president of Senegal, now former president, because he's been replaced in the meantime through democratic elections. It was not a coup. And his name was Macky Sall, President Macky Sall. These three were for an attack eventually against the Alliance of Sahel State. And the reason which they were advancing was that it was a violation of their own constitution, but of course also a violation of the African Union, which is called the Constitutive Act of the African Union, which dates back to the 9th of July 2002, when it was officially adopted. So they say, we cannot continue to accept this. We must absolutely reinstate legality. When you look closely at certain things, you also understand that these countries were the best in terms of their revenues. They had the best revenues. They were not poor. You can look. The per capita GDP, that is to say, general GDP divided by the number of population. Côte d'Ivoire is at 2,548. Nigeria is at 2,237. When you have 200 million inhabitants, it's not too bad. Okay? And then Senegal, 1,637. These are the countries that were in fact supporting this idea. But the average amount of GDP per capita, the average is 1,800. And you will see that the three countries that are in fact at the beginning of this alliance are not anywhere near that. Burkina Faso is 852. Mali, 847, and Niger, which is really pitiful. So what they say is, okay, you claim that we must be, we must follow our rules, the regulations, and the law, and so on. But in the meantime, the populations are very poor. They don't have anything. Sorry, they don't have anything. One doesn't eat law and regulation. What they're asking for is really to have a standard of living which is acceptable. Okay. And we are prepared to do that. We have taken over in order to bring what the population wants. And the example which they give is that these three coups were bloodless. There was no violence in the sense that people were opposing them. Instead, they were supporting them. The population was protecting them and didn't want any reversal of situation. So for people who don't like them, I think it's a bit bizarre that the population should have that kind of standing. Now, when people are asking for President Bazoum, who was the president of Niger, to return, nowhere in Niger did you see a march asking for his return. The demand for his return came from Washington, from London, from Paris, but not from Niger. So the question is, who is more important? Is it the people who are concerned, or are the people who work with you as partners? That is the question. And so a state, for it to be solid, to be in its foundation, there needs to be a connection between those who are the citizens and the values which are from the culture. It's very important. So, but the other side, that is to say, the ones who were actually asking for an attack, were saying that no, everything is fine. When you take the macroeconomic aggregates, the ECOWAS is doing very well. They were 100 billion GDP in 1990, and now they are 300 and they made much more now, about 300 billion GDP. So, which is a jump, a big jump. In fact, the question is it enough to look at the aggregate macroeconomic criteria? No. What is important is how people feel, how they live on a daily basis. And on that account, there were problems because people were not happy at all. Now, the paradox here is that this map is from 2020. And if you look at good governance, neither Nigeria nor Côte d'Ivoire are rated in the good governance file. And yet they are the ones who are threatening for bad governance, the ones who must go. So there's a paradox. This is 2020, before the takeover in 2021. So they themselves were branded not in the category of good governance. So the question now is, who is fooling whom? What is the agenda behind all this? Who is supporting what? And who are you working for? These are the questions that the population of Africa were asking themselves, especially West Africa. Now, having said that, these are just the gross domestic product. It's important to make a link. And the question which I'm going to ask now, it also concerns the strengthening of a state. It concerns the solidity of a state. What makes for solid states? And I'm now going just to ask, is there a link between history and the shape of a state? I think these are questions which we have not pondered about sufficiently in Africa. Is there a link, yes or no, between the solidity of a state, the longevity of a state? Because we saw that the empires went from the 9th century to the 16th century, uninterrupted, but rather growing. Okay? Now, when you ask that question, I'm just going to give 2 or 3 examples. And you will yourself guess what is my answer, even though we are in a diplomatic arena, training arena, you will guess what is my position. Is there a link between the two? Okay. In fact, when you take the American case, 4th of July, 1776. What do you see? It was a unilateral declaration of independence because they have had enough of what they considered to be abuses from the British Crown. So on that one day, they decided that from this day on, we will free ourselves. What are the features of the American political system? It is anti-aristocratic in the sense that it doesn't have nobility and so on. It is a system that insists on checks and balances. The legislative checks on the executive, which checks on the judiciary, and vice versa. Why? In order to maximize the chances of a citizen to have his rights. All this is owed to the history. The American system also has something else. You can move from nothing in one lifetime and go to the top. This is very difficult in a continent like Europe. Okay, so the point is that the American system is configured taking into consideration its own history, and that is what will root it inside in order for its functionality to be optimal. When you take the British, they don't have a constitution, as you know. But the British have the House of Lords, they have the House of Commons, but you will not have that in America because you have no nobility with land there officially. Okay. The British system relies on the gentleman's agreement, and the gentleman's also statement. When he tells you something, you must say that you must know that it's going to be like that. But it's democratic. Why? Because the majority who's in the House of Commons are really the ones who rule democratically, not the House of Lords. So there too, you have a system that is a consequence of its history. The question which we ask now concerning Africa is what is the African system of value, the African system of philosophy that informs the political state, shape of a state? That is the question. And maybe that could be a problem, because when you don't have that, it will not be very strong. You can change, you can bring new actors, but the fact of the matter is that there will be no link between, or no symbiosis between the citizens who are concerned and the text which you produce. Because those who've been to faculties of law, of course they will understand all this. But in the villages, your constitutions will not be heard or understood. So there will be, of course, a gap. And the solidity of the state will pay a heavy toll on that. So we need to have, surely, some kind of link between the two. Now, in this particular case, the military rulers, here they are called the juntas, I think that's what you always hear. The military rulers have not said that they're going to stay for long, even though that's always the way it starts, okay? After a while they change, I think they have started already. But we've had in this part of Africa exceptional leaders in the person of Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara was a man who actually, in 4 years, changed his country. Totally. It turned it into a self-sufficient country in terms of food after 4 years, which, of course, was a big challenge he was able to meet. So, we cannot say for sure that nothing good will happen. I think it would be presumptuous for us to say that. But the truth is that we need systems in Africa that are more anchored and more open to the way things are done there. And I'm just going to give you a few differences between the African social system and what obtains here. One, public policy makers, be they in the village, be they in town, be they in the desert or whatever. The unit for political action in Africa is the community, not the individual. It makes a difference. An individual in the political system or social system is important insofar as he or she belongs to a community, which gives him or her identity. The second thing, which is interesting, is that in terms of religion, I can tell you that most people will come to tell you, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, all that, true. But they all believe in always also the ancestry, some way or the other. When things get bad, they always think about how to get to and talk to the ancestors somehow. So that's what I'm talking about, the hybrid. It's a hybrid system. Officially, it is one thing, but in reality, it is a combination of many things. And I think it's important to know that. Now, the link with the time. Here in Europe, you say, time is money. You also say, the time that passes never come back. But for us, that's not the case. Time always comes back. Why? And I'm going to just, any African who is here will give the same answer. When you lose your father or your mother or a close relative, and that at the same moment, a child is born to you, to your couple, for instance, what do you do? What do you do? If there are Africans here, what do you do? When you've just lost, let's say, a father or mother, and then at the same time, a child is born. What do you do? Absolutely. Absolutely. And usually, yes, that's the automatic thing. And you start calling him small papa, because that's the link. Okay. So it's important to see the way the time is perceived. The time is not perceived as something which is evanescent, which never comes back. No. And that's why in Africa you don't have, at least in traditional Africa, you have the moment. People say, I will come to visit you early in the morning, midday, early afternoon, late afternoon, or at night. They will not say, I'm coming at 9 p.m. And then you look at your watch, you say, you came at 9:05, you're late. Because what we use, in fact, is the moment. All this is important to understand because it shapes the way you act or react. And when we are in conversation with the West or the Northern Hemisphere, these subtleties are important to master. So, in this particular case, the three men in uniform, I would call them that way, have said that they are going to leave. But what is certain is that if circumstances change, they will find a good excuse not to go. And for them, it will not be a violation of given, it will be explained by the fact that the circumstances do not allow us to go yet. I'm not saying that this is what they will do, but I'm saying that it is a probability. Okay, now, I will not be too long, but I just want to say that Africa today is at the crossroads. Africa is at the crossroads, and Africa is really, in this 21st century, experiencing a phenomenal, I would say, change. It's important to understand that. It is not well said here, it's not well understood here, and it's not even talked about. Between 2000 and 2010, I repeat, between 2000, because you can check, 2000 and 2010, 6 of the out of the 10 fastest growing economies, out of 10, 6 were in Africa. It comes as a surprise to many. Out of the 10 fastest growing economies, 6 were located in Africa. And the fastest growing economy, which surpassed China, is Ethiopia, with a 12% growth rate. But yet, when we talk about Ethiopia, many people still remember the 1974, 1975 episode. Okay? So, things are changing. And it's important, therefore, when dealing with the African audience, to incorporate these changes. It's very important to do so. And once we do that, we understand that there are specific things which we need to know. Among the things which we need to know is that the majority of the products which you need for your economy here are to be found there in Africa. I don't know whether I should give you the full list. I'm sure you already are aware of the list of products which are in Africa. For instance, 50% of diamonds are there, 90% of the coltan, and so on. And coltan is, of course, necessary for this. And in one country only, 30% of the world coltan is there. One country, the DRC. So I don't want to give you the list, it's a long list. But we must, therefore, draw some conclusions concerning such things as state building, state reinforcing. And I come back now to Professor Francis Fukuyama. He says that his problem is to convey towards the developing countries how to build strong states, which means that he doesn't ask himself, what is the way that those states are imbued with? What kind of ideology they have? What kind of mandate towards the people they have? What kind of fulfillment they will bring? What kind of service they will bring to the population? His problem, and I'm not criticizing him, of course, his problem is to make sure that what obtains there, maybe, is also replicated around the world because the results are good in America or in the North. I think that is a danger because we need, as I tried to show, we need to make sure that the solidity is derived because of the good anchoring, because of the good roots which a society has with its political system and with the state. And that is why you had the long tenure of the empires, because there was a symbiosis between what they were doing and what the people were waiting for. But for us today in Africa, what we have is constitutions, which are constructed, which are drafted by a minority of people who can read them and bring them to the capital cities. But yet, the majority of people don't even know what is inside the constitution for a start. And how can you apply something you are unaware of existence? So we must look for ways to create a symbiosis. And it means looking. If you take, for instance, the Japanese, they did that in during the Meiji, 1868, the Meiji era. What they did was they went around the world and picked the best and brought it and contextualized it. That is the key word. They contextualize it for it to work for the Japanese context. And I think the problem which we have in Africa today is just to imitate without contextualizing, without taking into account some of the differences which I highlighted here. Dealing with a community is not the same as dealing with one individual. If today you steal to a community in Africa, you're in trouble. If you steal to one person, you're also in trouble, but less so. Okay? Because the priorities are not the same. Okay, so I would like to conclude, because I think that Markus is looking at me and also looking at his watch. When you look at both alternatively, it's clear that he's too polite to send me the message in a more clear way. But I would like to conclude by saying that today, in 2024, the mindset should really change because we are in a complex interdependency. What you need is what we want, but what we have is also what you want. That is the truth. So instead of coming and giving, I would say, directives, orders, if you don't do this, you don't do that, I think that today's African youth in particular is no longer sensitive to that because they are digitalized. They know on the spot what happens anywhere in the world. And therefore, the attitudes towards problems, towards files to solve, towards dealing with people has changed. And that is why when you see the young captain, he goes to the United Nations and tells you what he has to say, looking at you in the face, which was difficult to believe only 20 years ago. So the mindset must also be now mutually accommodated. Okay, you want something, okay, we also want something, but we must dialogue and find a middle way, what we can call a win-win situation. It's important to adopt principles of equitable trade. Most Africans, especially the African youth, I'm not the spokesperson, but I talk to them every day. They are tired of international aid. They don't want international aid anymore. International aid has never developed a single country in the world. I think that we all agree with that. If it did, we would have known that. We'd have noticed that already after 64 years, which most African countries have become independent. What the Africans want today, especially the young generation, is to translate that money into purchasing and trading at a just and equitable price. That is really the main request today. Aid is infantilization. Aid is the idea that we have pity on you, we'll give you something for free. But nothing is free in this world. And I think that most of us now have realized that. So what is better is really to exchange and to buy at the right price. If that is done, there will be no more need to have aid, international aid. Okay. It's important to fight immigration, because I would like to tell you that there are many Africans who would rather stay at home, but who have no choice but leaving. You know, many people think that it is a first choice. No, usually it is the last choice. It's because life there in Africa sometimes is made extremely difficult. Why? The transformation of raw materials is a major issue. You cannot ask at the same time that the material be handed, exported, transformed overseas, therefore creating jobs overseas, and then not understanding that the people have no jobs where those materials in fact belong. So the effort, that's why I like to talk to the young generation. I think all of those who have taken my course are always make sure that we exchange in the most honest manner. I also listen to what they have to say, and I'm happy to say that at this Diplomatic Academy, the students also are very open and we exchange very frankly. It's important to make sure that the raw materials are transformed in Africa. One, it adds to their value. Two, it creates jobs there. And it makes less people who have to leave and to go overseas, and sometimes in the most awful manner, inhuman manner. And for every African that leaves the shore to go through the Mediterranean, we, the decision makers in Africa, we have a reproach to make to ourselves. It means that it's unbearable to live there, and they prefer even the unacceptable. So if in the negotiations with the Northern Hemisphere, the global North, as it is now said, it's possible to make sure that these raw materials are transformed in Africa, it will boost the job market right there. And I think that it's something very important. Now, the thing before last is a profound transformation and readjustment of our curriculum. Ladies and gentlemen, is it normal to teach our own students that we were discovered by the Portuguese? The Portuguese came and discovered in Cameroon in 1472. That was the date. So my question is always very simple. So there was nobody there, or those who were there were not alive until some provincial people came and then discovered us. The problem which we have is that in Cameroon we have a long-standing kingdom, the kingdom of the Bamoons, created in 1394. The dynasty that was created in 1394, which is the Sahelian dynasty, is still today, in an uninterrupted manner, sitting on the throne. It's in the west of Cameroon. So it's the 21st monarch now, uninterrupted. So my question is, if the Portuguese discovered us in 1472, how come that the kingdom was created in 1394? So you see that we ourselves must not continue to teach such things. And it's bad for us, because I don't think that people can accept that indefinitely. We are the ones who are teaching that to our students. And so there should be a reform of curriculum. There should be more put now into the sciences of, but technology, I would say rather, technology. The capacity to transform one's environment. That's very important. And the digitalization is really already on the go. There are more than 700 million smartphones or cell phones in Africa. That's why people are very well informed. They know what's going on around the world. So when they discuss with you, they take the time, they know already. So it's important to inject the kind of transformative knowledge that can help Africa to actually take care of herself. It's very important. And finally, I want to finish by saying that, by reminding all of us that we have all come from Africa. Yes, if you go to Ethiopia, you go to Kenya, you will see the Rift Valley. At the Rift Valley, these are where you can find the oldest human remains. So your great-great-great-grandfather left from there and then went to Malta. It was a man of Grimaldi, and then started coming towards Europe. Okay? And also the color of his skin changed due to the atmosphere, due to the winters, due to all of that. Nature changes, it makes you readapt. So because of that, Africans must consider everybody else as distant members of our family. And that's why we must spread the message of the Ubuntu. Ubuntu means the message of solidarity, message of help, mutual help, and the message of empathy, the ability to put yourself in the shoes of others and do things the way you would have liked them to do for you. So I think that is really the biggest message that Africa should bring today, and should exchange it and should spread it all over the world, so that we are sure that the crisis in West Africa will end if everyone thinks the same. Thank you very much indeed for your kind contribution. Thank you.
Jean-Emmanuel, thanks a lot for a great talk. So there are lots and lots of questions, issues raised ranging from the African states and relations between state and society to relations between extra-regional powers, the West, for instance, and Africa. And I anticipate quite a few questions, so therefore we're always going to go in clusters of 3, so with 3 questions at a time. And by the way, when I look at you, then I see quite a few former students, so maybe a special welcome to that. That doesn't happen all the time, and I think you have a lot.
You're most welcome.
You have a lot to do with that. So, who wants to ask questions? Yes. We're going to do it with a microphone, and then so always gather 3 at a time. Okay?
Hello.
So always 3 questions at a time.
It's okay?
So maybe you have to write them down.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor, for this brilliant presentation. I'm positively surprised because most of the time when we come to any lecture about Africa, it's a kind of negative picture we're seeing. But this has been totally fair, really. I think only some missing point. Those 3 countries before the change were totally disintegrated, totally. They were down. And now if you look at the climates of the countries, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, you can see that they are going toward, slowly but surely, a kind of sovereignty where the decisions are taken in their own country, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and in Niger. It's not dictated from Paris or from Washington, which really was the case. And it was not also dictated, and indirectly, from Côte d'Ivoire or Senegal, from Macky Sall or from Ouattara, who tried to destroy this willing of people. So it's not a question, it's just a comment that I was really, I'm from Mali.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm representing Mali here as a consul.
Okay.
I'm really surprised, positively, to see somebody coming from Africa and have a positive picture of Africa. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then let's make it easy for you, the lady in the front. Yeah.
Thank you for your great presentation. Almost everything was new for me. I'm Rosa Guevara. I'm from the Defense Forces of Finland. And I have a question concerning Russia. How does the Russian media show in the area? Are they Russian troll factories in the area spreading Russian disinformation? And how wide is that Russian information function at the moment in the area or even in wider Africa area? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And then we're going to go in the... yes.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much for the presentation, and find it very interesting, this new African approach of governance you mentioned, especially regarding the 3 states. What do you think, will the citizens also in these 3 states, but also in the neighboring countries, will be in agreement with this new approach of African governance? And even more, maybe, what do you think about the international community? Would they be willing to support this kind of neo-African governance, especially the Northern Hemisphere, as you mentioned? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jean-Emmanuel.
But his was a comment.
There was, still.
Still.
Let's
Okay.
always bundle 3.
You are the boss after.
Yes. No, really.
You're managing the... Okay, let me just open. I hope it's open.
Yes, it is.
Can you hear me?
You're fine.
Okay, fine. Okay, how does the Russian media function? How does it function in West Africa and in Africa? I was certain that we'll have some question concerning Russia, but I must pay tribute to the Academy, because I came here two years ago, and I gave a lecture on to understand the African vote at the United Nations concerning the Ukraine-Russia crisis or war. Okay, it's important to understand that the position of Africa has to do with the interests of Africa. Just like the positions of the United States are United States-centered. The same thing with Austria. It's normal that each part of the world looks at safekeeping or making sure that it propels its own interest first. This is what the international relations dynamics is all about, no matter what we say. Ultimately, that's what it's all about. So, concerning Russia, most African countries even don't have Russia in their vicinity. But Africans consider it insulting. I prefer to tell you the truth. Africans considered it insulting to say that we don't know what we are doing by seeking the protection of Russia. Nobody's seeking the protection of Russia. Nobody. What we're looking for is a partner to help us momentarily. And I think Mr. Putin was warned clearly by the Africans that we cannot leave a context of constraint and accept willingly to enter another one. Africans are not so stupid. No. But we know now how to play with the different partners. It may please you, it may not please you, but today, everyone does that. The problem that we have, and I think when you are in a gathering like this, it's important to understand what is our reading of things. Why are the Africans not prepared to jump in a bandwagon in which they don't think it is in their interest to do so? The first thing which Africans have is a problem of NATO. NATO is the organization that killed Muammar Gaddafi. Yes. So, Muammar Gaddafi was not a saint. I always say that all my students who are here and hear the same word, I always say, he's not a saint, he was not a saint. When you order that 2 747s be blown up, you are not a saint. Sure. But we cannot judge him on the premises of his bad relationship with the West, which were horrible, this relationship. But we have to judge him in accordance with what he did for African integration and unity. There he invested a lot. And he went even so far, for us, when he created African Monetary Fund, African Investment Bank, and African Development Bank. These three were to open within the year when he was killed. So that would have been our true economic liberation. And I think that all these entered into the decision to do away with him. So I must be honest with you to tell you that that has been extremely badly taken by the Africans. So now when we see that NATO is maneuvering again, for us, we cannot support NATO under no circumstance. You support NATO is normal. NATO isn't, first of all, the mandate of NATO has nothing to do with Libya, as far as I know. It's North America and Europe, not Libya. Second thing, the United Nations, Africans are very cross with the United Nations. Why? Resolution 1973, which was supposedly to protect the Libyans who were endangered by a crazy leader called Muammar al-Gaddafi. That resolution turned out to be a tool, finally, to kill a sitting president. How do we know that? When Muammar Gaddafi was captured, I'm sorry to use that term, but that's what it was used. He was in good health. Everyone could see that. Normally, in this setting in Europe, he should have been sent to The Hague. That's what we were expecting, and perhaps himself. But he was killed. Who asked for him to be killed? We'd like to know. The second thing is, the minute he was killed, the whole operation was dismantled, even though nothing has been resolved. 1973, as an operation, came to an end, that resolution, which is a proof that it was not the protection of civilians, but the arrest and doing away with the president. And I think for the United Nations, for us, it was shocking, very shocking. The other thing which Africans have with the United Nations, it's good for you to know, really. Maybe some professional diplomat would hesitate to tell you this, but we are academics, okay? Is the fact that the arms, the destruction, what is it? Massive
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction. Yeah. It was a pitiful exercise. When we saw that, in Africa, we could not believe that such a mise en scène is possible for people who respect themselves. So you see, that was a factor of decredibilization. People started to wonder, what is going on? So I think it's important to have that as a background. Now, concerning Russia, African nations have always had relationship with Russia, always. African countries have always had relations with Russia since 1960. In fact, Russia had even a university called the Patrice Lumumba University, where they trained at a lower price many Africans. It's true. No one can deny that. Now, what we ask is for you to understand that we must act according to our interests. They may converge, they may diverge. That is my answer.
Let's do a next round of questions. Yes, maybe in the back, Emmanuel, and then we're going to go. Yeah.
My name is Emil Fosu. Thank you, Professor, for the insightful presentation. I'm a former student, and yes, I have a question for you. You made mention of how the governance system in the US and also in Britain are informed by their history. And you clearly stated that in Africa, we focus on the community symbiosis rather than individualism. And my question has to do with the Sahel states, the men in the uniform. One of the major reasons why they took power was to do away with the people who were making the country dry, the people who were dancing to the tunes of the West. So they came to save their people by serving the community symbiosis. So my question, therefore, is this a major justification for them to still be in power if indeed they are going to put the interest of the people at hand, rather than putting the self-aggrandizing nature? Is it a justification for them to be in power, even for the time being? I don't know, if they are going to even rule according to the African principles.
Okay.
Thank you. We're going to gather again. Yes.
So, good evening. First of all, thank you for the very insightful presentation. My name is Jakob Heisting. I'm a MICE2 student.
Yeah.
My question would be, what future trends do you foresee in the dynamics of terrorism in the Sahel zone in the context of the explained state-building processes, also looking at the interventions of external powers such as Russia? Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have one more in this. Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you so much for all of your very interesting insights. My name is Antonia. I'm also a MICE2 student, and my question would concern the political dimension of the alliance, and would be how do internal political conflicts within the member states impact the overall effectiveness of the alliance. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Jean-Emmanuel.
Thank you very much. Emmanuel, I'm not sure that I really understood your question now. I cannot answer a question I haven't understood. I think that is the...
Emmanuel?
Emmanuel, yes.
Emmanuel, I think basically it's about a moral conundrum, right?
Yeah, but my question was if indeed one of the major reasons when they took power was to serve the interest of the people rather than those who were milking the country dry, putting their self-aggrandizing nature and also dancing to the tunes of the West. But they said, just like Thomas Sankara was doing for his country. So I was asking, my question was, does this serve as a justification for them to rule, despite they being military men or any other form of governance, if they are going to rule according to the African way?
Now I understand. I think your question is a very difficult one to answer, despite the fact that it appears easy. Because of some problems. First of all, there's no deadline as to when to declare that the job is over. It's not possible to say that. What are the criteria which have been fulfilled before they say, now we can go, or now we cannot go yet? There's no chronogram. There's nothing. The second thing, which makes it more difficult, is that what do you call African way of management? Okay. Is it looking at our philosophies, looking and adapting it? I don't know. But if you look at a country like Ethiopia, they have the history which is intact, really. They've kept their language, they've kept their religion, they've kept their history, everything. So, but is it an African country in the sense now? They're still. It's important to understand that there should be an interface between the two. It's important to have a hybrid type of system. You cannot sever yourself from the world and isolate yourself. It's not possible. It's not even something which should be done. Now, the thing is for the Africans to know what are their own priorities. That is a very important aspect. And now to see around the world what can reinforce, or which partners are willing to come and reinforce their own objectives. I think that should be the dynamic, really. That's what I would say. What future trends for terrorism? Right? Okay. Something which maybe since the Malian diplomat is around, he may give us more light on that. To my knowledge, Mali is a Muslim country. I've been there many times. Senegal is a Muslim country majority. So when the jihadists come there, what do they come to do? Not to turn you into Muslims, which you've been for at least 200 years now, approximately. So that is a major question, which I've always asked myself, what are they doing there? The people whom you call the jihadists, in my analysis, I call them bandits. What they do, they are gangsters. They have nothing to do with Islam. Why do I say that? The first victims whom they kill are the imams. If I'm not telling the truth, you can rectify. The imams are their first victims. 80% of the people whom they kill are Muslims. If you call that Islamists, then we don't understand what words mean. Because they work for the discrepancy, for the destruction of Islam in many ways. But they had their own agenda, which is basically political. Terrorism, what is the definition of terrorism, technically? Is the use of force to attain political objectives. That's the technical definition of terrorism. And this is exactly what they do. Many times, it has been told to the West not to call them jihadists because they're not jihadists. Jihad in Muslim faith has a precise meaning, which is not what they do. But when you use that term, you confuse everything. So to me, the agenda of terrorism, we are dealing with bandits, with gangsters, who kill mostly the Muslims. Now, how do you deal with these issues? The reason why people go to them is because they're poor. If you deal with the issue which is at hand, meaning economic poverty, you will, in the midterm and the long term, solve the problem, but not bring more arms. Bringing more arms will not find a solution to the problem. It will only exacerbate the problem because arms call for more arms. If you answer the question, how to uplift the economic situation of these people by training them, by giving them the possibility to live better, then you are addressing the problem. But if you address it militarily only, you're not solving anything. And this is what we are seeing. Arms call for more arms, which again call for... You know that there's a country in Europe which have today, between last year and this year, has increased its budgetary defense, budgetary allocation by 30%. They have 430 billion defense budget today. I don't give the name because I don't want to appear as if I'm accusing some countries. But it shows that this focus on only armament, to me is the wrong focus. The real better focus is to how to look for alleviating poverty and then giving the means for people to move. And that's why I'm talking about the curriculum. The curriculum we have cannot lead us to development. If we mean by development progress, because for me the two are not the same. The two are not the same. Progress has to do with your own choices. But development is also a term which is which comes from Harry Truman, the 20th of January, 1945. That's when he spoke of that problem, of that question for the first time, at least in the political arena, not the philosophical arena, when he was making his speech for president. Okay, so that also is something we can talk about. But my idea is really not to answer with a military response. I don't think that's the best approach, because it produces what we see today. Political, the last question was, you talked about Russia also, Russia, right? No, you didn't talk about...
How far the conflicts within the member states affect the overall effectiveness of the alliance?
Okay, internal conflicts are inevitable. The thing to do is to make sure that you save the main philosophy for which you are fighting. But discrepancies are normal. You cannot have human beings who are together and then say that it's smooth from beginning to end. But what you must know is what is more important. And then, even if problems occur, as they are bound to do, now you must know how to save the most important goals to attain. That's what I would say. And I think they know what they are doing, especially when you have adversity. It increases your desire to be together. Yes. Okay. Because I thought I heard something about Russia.
No, there was one thus far.
Okay.
Are there any
political?
more? Sorry.
There was something about the political dimension? No? No. Okay.
We can do one last round, but then a quick one, preferably with people who haven't spoken yet. And I think there are three, so that works very well. And then I may add a little something as well. Sure. We have 4, we have 5, including myself. So let's just try to be brief, okay? Yes, please.
Thank you very much for your small introduction, well, not small introduction, but very in-depth introduction into the topic. My name is Ahmed El-Hedki. I'm a student in international legal studies in Austria. My question is, my parents are from Libya, and my question is how the Sahel states cooperation with the Arabic states of Africa, what's like the future of that, what's like your point of view, what the future holds. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. And then the ambassador in the front. There you go. Yes. There you go. Yes.
Thank you. I'm Robert Zischk. I'm the Africa Director, Austrian Foreign Ministry. So I deal with African issues on a daily basis. I must confess I've got difficulties in addressing most of your statements. I would, and I say that because we have got many students here, that I have really got difficulties to share quite a number of your views.
I'm not surprised.
Yes, but I mean, turning to the theme of the evening, the alliance of the Sahel states, and also the notion of democracy. We had just elections in South Africa. We had elections in Senegal. We had elections last year in Kenya. all those elections demonstrate that also in Africa, democracy works. If you look at the Sahel states, you had all in all, if you count them, I guess 7 or 8 putches in the past 3 years, unconstitutional changes. If you take the example of the 26th of July in Niger, a democratically elected president was overthrown by 2 generals. And in all those states, military juntas have been established, claiming that they represent the will of the people. How would you demonstrate, prove that they really represent the will of the people? In 2 of the 3 countries, and Niger will be next, the rules have already said they will extend the transition period for 5 years, and they will stand for election after those 5 years. The question simply is, does Africa, and I guess one has to underline, and then I stop because I could give another lecture, that Africa is different to the rest of the world. I claim that it is not the case. We've got many issues in common. And if you've got visitors here, foreign ministers, presidents from Angola meeting our president, our chancellor, our foreign minister, I hear a completely different story than I hear from you. So there are many realities, and Africa is a big continent, 55 countries, and all of them are, and you know it much better than I do, different. And I've got, at least after that statement, one question relating to your country, Paul Biya, Cameroon, 91 years or 95 years old, or 92, and the ruling since 1982, I think. Second president in the history of Cameroon, which became independent, if I recall it correctly, on the 1st of January 1960. So I would love to hear your view on the current political situation, very briefly, in Cameroon, and how it could serve as an example for the rest of the continent.
Okay, thank you. No, it's good to have a debate. Then gentleman behind you.
This is a lady also.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. 2 questions more looking forward. My name is Franz Schmiediel, working with civil society partners on the African continent, mainly social movements, climate movements, unions. The one is, I think 2 of the 3 countries you mentioned in the Sahel, they are promoting now a kind of national dialogue with different parts of the society. Do you think such national dialogues can be part of a transition or even of a state building? And the second point is the African-European relations, AU-EU. I think they're at the low point. When we look back to 2007, when there was the joint African and European strategy, we agreed on common values. I think after you mentioned Libya, then the European migration monologue, how Africans say, came. Then the issue about COVID and the rejection of a TRIPS waiver for vaccination and so on. So, and now we have Ukraine and Gaza. So there are so many things which made a big gap. What do you propose to overcome such a gap, to improve the EU-AU relations?
Thank you. And then, yes, and then in the back.
Good evening. Thank you so much for your intervention. My name is Sofia. I'm a MICE2 student here. And my question will be, considering that there have been 5 successful coups in the 3 member countries of the alliance in the last 4 years, how do you envision the future of state building in this region, and what could be the strategies that could be adopted to achieve stability in such a turbulent context.
Thank you. And let me add a few things myself, and then sorry about this.
Okay, go ahead.
Three quick questions. One of them, you alluded basically to the strategy of hedging, yeah. So that many African regimes now, so they don't stick entirely, say, to Russia or to China or to the United States or any other savvy regional players somewhere on the Arabian Peninsula or somewhere, but that they don't decide, yeah. So they basically take the benefits, whatever they can take. Which is, I think, fair enough. I agree with you to some extent. It is fair enough. But my question is whether that's always for the good of the people, or whether that's more a tactic of some regimes to prolong their stay in power, at times unconstitutionally. Mm-hmm. My second question is about constitutions and how rooted they are in society. And I think that's a very, very important point that you make. Yeah, so the people have to believe in the political system, and it's a very, very democratic thing to do. But the question is, how do you actually bring something like that into being? You mentioned Ethiopia several times as a good example, and it is a good example in many ways. But sometimes there are also a lot of caveats when one looks at it, right? So long time, whatever, dictatorship at some stage, early 1990s comes to an end. Basically, new elites come to power. They thought very, very carefully already in the 1970s when they were studying together about how a new constitution could look like, right? And then they superimposed this kind of very much regional, ethno-regional constitution that probably goes a long way in explaining why then something like Tigray happened, and why there are all kinds of horizontal conflicts between Amhara and Oromo and everything elsewhere in the country. So basically, my question to you is how do I make sure, what is the kind of process that I can root the constitution? And that actually dovetails a little bit with the question that you got from my colleague Schmiedinger about this, right? Because the national dialogues may be perhaps a way there. So Kenya could be a good example there. And my third point, but very, very quickly, I'm sorry about all of this, is about the coups. So as you mentioned, I mean, so in the AU Constitutive Act, there's all kinds of things against coups. There's in the AU Constitutive Act, there are all kinds of other things that in my opinion, are very progressive. So let's say the responsibility to protect is in the Constitutive Act. Mm-hmm. It's not just somewhere in whatever a World Summit outcome, soft law, or whatever, but it actually is in there. What's your view on that? So is the AU Constitutive Act, in terms of those pillars of kind of polities that it wants to foster, does it go into the right direction, or would you think that there are certain things who have to track back?
Okay, this is a long, there are so many questions. I'm not sure I answer all of them, but I will try. Concerning democracy, I must say, not only do I live in Africa, but I've been to 38 of the 55 African states, for one reason or another, including Libya, including Morocco, including Eritrea, to such places. So when I talk about Africa, it's not an abstract thing that I'm talking about. No. You talked about, I'm very happy that you disagree with me. I'm not surprised. Because what I'm saying is not meant to please necessarily. No. I tell you what I think from my observations, from the discussions with the youth, with the political decision makers, with the opposition. That's where I take my references. The fact that you go to vote is not a sign of democracy in Africa. I'm sorry to say so. Because often, elections are rigged And the machine is such as another result is not possible, unfortunately. So I'm sorry to say that elections should come after issues have been resolved. It is not the election that solves problems. It's not possible. In fact, most of the time, elections exacerbate problems, like in Kenya, when issues have not been solved before. Because the way the Africans traditionally solve their problem is that they will take a week, a month, a year on one issue. Until that thing is solved, we don't move to the next level. That's the principle of the palaver. And the principle of the palaver is to have everyone on board before we move. And once you have lost, you have lost the case, for instance, as I've told many of you who are here. The problem of the African is to make sure that the loser doesn't lose face. And therefore, he's more taken care of than the one who has won the case. So, and as you know, the fact that you go to the polls, you know, I don't want to maybe to describe some of the things that I know. You call people, you give them money, and you say, okay, when you put the ballot, I want you to bring me back the ones which you have not voted, so that I'm sure that the money I gave you corresponds to the vote which I ordered you to do. That is, I think that many people who are here can testify to that. So what I'm saying is that you are entitled, sir, of course, to think what you want. It's true. It's your right. But there, in the field, election does not equate with democracy necessarily. Not necessarily. There may be convergence at some point in specific countries. If you take the habit of Senegal, yes, Senegal has a constitutional court that says no to the president, and that abrogates a presidential decree. I don't know any constitutional court in Africa that can do that. I don't know. If you're aware, please let me know. But Senegalese constitutional court has done it. They have annulled the decree of the president, telling him that it is an illegal decree. Senegalese democracy, I believe in that. Because throughout the times, throughout the years, they have proven to have a solid democratic culture. Why? They have some specific traits which are very interesting. They have a language which is shared by the whole nation. So the dissemination of ideas is easier to do or to make than in many other countries, perhaps. Now, the problem which we have is that we don't want to translate most of our things in the local languages. When you have ballot in French and in English, it's a mistake. Because there are many people who don't know what to do and how to do it. And so we need to take steps to bring the process closer to its customers. But we who have been to the law schools, schools of political science, I'm a Cambridge graduate. I'm a London School of Economics graduate. So I know the way people think there about what must be done in Africa. And I'm saying it's a mistake. Because the reality on the ground contradicts what we would have liked to see. The reality is that when people have nothing to eat, you can manipulate them very easily. Very easily. And that is what we see, unfortunately. So there are exceptions. As said, Senegal is a true democracy. No one in his own right mind can doubt it. They've proven it. There may be one or two others like that, but the majority of the cases are democratie de façade, the ones that do that so that they can get the money from the European Union, the money from the World Bank, the money from the IMF. And then when they come, they do it the exact reverse of what they are supposed to do. I'm afraid that is what I see. Okay. Now, national conferences. I think you talked about the civil society. The question is, how autonomous is a civil society in our contexts? How autonomous can they be? Or do they render themselves? Because he who plays the tune calls the music. Yes. And people are suspicious. If they look at the source of a financing an operation, but you don't give money so that your interests are not taken care of. It's normal. So the idea is the autonomization. How you become autonomous is, I think, more the right issue. You see, for instance, development, the notion of development. I've conducted a long-term survey, and there's a book which is called Understanding Development from an African Perspective, which I directed. There were many, there were 15 people who wrote in it. There were historians, jurists, geostrategists, economists, everything. The question which I ask at the school where I am, the International Relations Institute, I asked them, they were coming from so many countries in Africa. I said, how do you call development in your language, the national language? And does it exist? And what does it mean? And the first thing that I can say is that it does exist. But the meaning is very interesting. When you do the synthesis of development, just to show you the differences, because you say it's the same thing, democracy is the same everywhere. Okay. Now, I'll just take the example of the term development. What transpires from the notion of development when you do an amalgamation of all the definitions, or almost, is that development in African countries and contexts is the ability of the community to master its own destiny. That is the definition that you can take as a common ground. The ability of the community to master its own destiny. The second thing that comes out is how? By making sure of an equitable and just distribution of goods and services available to all members of those communities. These are the two things. There, it's clear that that definition is qualitative. It's not quantitative. It's not quantitative. It's qualitative. But here, okay, it's the number of calories per household and per person, the number of, I don't know, the level of GNP per capita, it's tarred roads, the percentage of tarred roads, the calories, as I said before. So it's quantitative most of the time here. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I'm saying it's different. There's no list which was handed to me by all those who answered the question in Africa of what is development. So, and the notion of being wealthy is not attached to money. You are wealthy because you have a big network of social contacts. And the chief in a village or anywhere is the one who is supposed to have the largest number of such contacts, but not necessarily the wealthiest. It's not like Mansa Musa, whom we saw. Okay, it's an exception. So, yet we talk about development, but do we refer to the same thing? I would be tempted to say no. We use the same terms. But in our subconscious mind, are we talking exactly about the same things? And these differences are important to mention, because you come to a quid pro quo thinking that you're talking about the same thing, but the notion is not perceived the same by the ones who you are talking to. So that's why I'm saying it's dangerous to say democracy is one thing. You didn't say that, sir. But I'm saying that to think eventually that it is one thing which applies everywhere. I say no. No. Even in the context, French democracy is not British democracy, is not American democracy. They have one common thing, the ability to choose, the ability to make alternative changes of government and so on, but it's not the same modalities because the history is not the same. Okay. Mr. Paul Biya, you asked me the question concerning Mr. Paul Biya. Elections are next year, in 2025. I can tell you that the place is already boiling. There are a lot of people who are preparing themselves to be into the registration lists for the election. Because we have 27 million inhabitants, and our list of registered people is barely 7 million. So the idea now is you cannot complain if you don't register. Changes come when you're able to be an actor of change. So that is why now the youth is mobilizing itself in order to make a difference in 2025. That is what I can tell you. You are a diplomat. I'm the son of a diplomat. My father was ambassador in the US and so on. I know that there are things you can say here. Maybe we can discuss later, if you wish. Okay. I don't know which one. African Union and European Union. Okay. I think the problem of Africa today is how to generate money to be autonomous. And I must be very honest, I was in the AU's commission for alternative sources of financing the AU. I was extremely disappointed. Extremely disappointed. I must be honest with you. If I stand here and say everything is okay in Africa, it's the land of milk and honey, I'm a dreamer who's lying to you. There are many problems in Africa, of course. There are many challenges. But where are the challenges? What I'm against is only to focus on challenges when it concerns Africa. Yeah, I'm not for that. But I'm saying that there are many difficulties in Africa as well. But we have them. We have also something different, okay, which are joys as well. So, when comes the time to free Africa from the slavery of dependency to money? Many African states refrain from that. I've seen it because I was sitting in the commission in Addis Ababa. The idea is very simple, very clear, and very rational. Every person who enters the African overall landmass pays $2. When you travel by airline, you pay $2. If you've paid 2,000 francs, $2,000 for your ticket, and then you ask to pay $2,002, I don't think it's too painful. Okay, so that was the idea. But when you add to the number of people, because traveling to Africa is a huge business today, then the African Union will never lack money. Never. Because there will be plenty of money every day in the coffers. But what happens? You have some African countries that block that for power politics. Because they are the ones, there are 5 who finance, I think 60% of the budget, which is the regular budget, knowing that the security budget, unfortunately, is handled by the EU, which is again another contradiction. Okay? So, my point is that we have the means, through alternative ways of financing the budget, to do so. But there are some countries which I will not give the name of here, of course, which have blocked that. I was in the meeting. It's not somebody who told me. I saw we have to adjourn the meeting and leave twice in Addis Ababa. Because these countries had blocked, they wanted to continue to be the masters of a game and in fact hold hostage the other 50 countries in Africa. This is not acceptable, but it is the truth, unfortunately. And now we all still have to ask for money when there's plenty of money to be had. Okay. Your questions, Mr.
But don't. So be selective. Don't worry. So we can talk about it. We can talk about it.
Today we live in a polycentric world. It's very important. We live in a polycentric world. Maybe it may please some, it may not. But Africa can now pick and choose in a way it was not able to do so 20 years ago. The question is, pick and choose to do what? You must have a blueprint first before you go and do your errands. You must have a blueprint. You must know what you're going to use the money for, how to reimburse it, and how to be a free person. When you owe money to people, you are not a free person. When you owe money to the World Bank and the IMF, you are not free. What we have noticed is that there are always new programs to make sure that Africa owes money to somebody at the World Bank and the IMF. I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. The minute you start liberating yourself, a new program comes. But you will tell me that, okay, make sure that you don't need money. Make sure that you are independent. Make sure that you organize yourself so as not to be always asking for money. That is the answer. But the problem is, do you master the intricacies of such a dynamics? The answer is no. That's why it's important. When we go back to the West African state, today, the seventh world producer of uranium is Niger. And yet, the GDP, as we saw, is less than $900. When you take Mali, Mali is the fourth world producer of gold today. I'm not talking about in those times. I'm saying today. I think third. Okay, I'm not too far. I'm happy that you're around. I said fourth, but now third. And yet Mali has insurmountable problems. So the question is, we must put order in our own houses. We as Africans. It's imperative that we should do that. We must have priorities. We must have sessions where we put those priorities and then work at accomplishing the goals which we set for ourselves. Nobody will come to do that for us, and we should not expect anyone to do that for us. Okay, so I think it's very important. So the multiplicity of partners is both a good thing and a dangerous thing, because you can multiply the sources of your subordination, as you can also multiply the sources of the people who will come to your help, knowing that you will be able, in a position to actually reimburse the money. So these are the two possibilities. But today we live in a polycentric world, and that is something which is clear. We can go to India, we can go to Turkey, we can go to Russia, we can go to India, as I said, we can go to all these places, okay? But it's not good to have that mentality where you have to wait for others to come and help you. No, because we have enough in Africa to be able to solve our own problems. Okay, I think that really, I want to thank you. If I haven't answered, maybe we have another opportunity. Once again, I want to pay tribute to the Akademie. Tell you that there are many things that I've been able to do here because there's academic freedom. Yes, there's academic freedom. Not once has the director or the deputy director or any member tell me that we don't want you to treat this subject. We don't want you to go into that direction. If you treat this subject, we prefer that you say this and that. Never. I've never heard that. So I want to pay tribute to the Diplomatic Academy and say that Africa, we also need to be responsible, but we need to say things the way we see them. Because that is how the dialogue is. You may see things differently, it's fine, it's no problem. But we have to tell the truth. We must not change our language because we have some people in front of us. We think that if we say this, it will please them. No, it's not good. We must say things and then confront our ideas and see how, eventually, we can come to a point of convergence or not. But I think that honesty is absolutely necessary when you deal with international relations, and the ability to be sure that this person tells you what he thinks or what he doesn't think, tells you also, I think that is very important. So I want to thank you once again for being here, so many of you. I knew that there will be some who are forced to be here.
No.
But I think that they are, when I see my former students, they've come all the way. And Mr. Director, thank you also for being here. And once again, I'm very delighted and touched by the fact that the Academy today allowed me to do this Jubilee lecture for my 20th year at the Academy. Thank you so much.